We bought that house in the spring of 2004 because my wife wanted grass. That's the truth of it. We'd spent 6 years in an apartment in Johnson City with a balcony that looked out on a dumpster corral. I and Carrie was pregnant with our second when the listing came up. A brick ranch built in 1968 on 2 acres outside Irwin, Tennessee. With a hedge along the road and a chain link fence down the north property line and the whole back of the lot running up into a stand of second growth hardwood before it hit the ridge. $94,000. We stood in that backyard on a Saturday in March with our 4-year-old running loops around us, and I remember Carrie put her hand on my arm and didn't say anything at all, and that was that. The neighbor came out the day we moved in. He came down the fence line with his hand already up in a wave from 50 feet off, and he introduced himself as Buddy Ledford. And he shook my hand through the gate and told me his wife had passed in '99, and that if I ever needed a ladder, he had too. He was maybe 65. Built thick through the shoulders the way men get from doing real work for 40 years, and he had the kind of face that looks like it's been outdoors. So long, it stopped being a color. He wore the same thing every day I ever saw him. Work pants, a pocket t-shirt, a mesh back cap. He seemed like every man I'd ever known growing up. I liked him fine. His house sat about 130 feet from ours. I angled an older frame house with a carport and a metal barn out back. His lot was maybe 4 acres, and he kept every square foot of it looking like a golf course. That's the first thing Carrie said about him. Before anything else, before any of it. She said, "That man never stops mowing." And he didn't. He mowed on Saturdays and Sundays and Tuesday evenings and Thursday mornings, sometimes twice in a single day. On an orange Kubota with a mid-mount deck. And in the beginning, I laughed about it because it's a thing you see out here. A widower with time and a machine, and nothing to do with either. I'd stand at the kitchen window with coffee and say something like, "There goes Buddy." And Carrie would say something back and we'd go on with our morning. It took me about 6 weeks to notice the pattern. And even then, I only noticed it because I got laid up. I threw my back out in May putting in a swing set and spent 4 days on the couch by the front window with a heating pad. And when you spend 4 days looking out the same window at the same yard, you start to see the shape of things. He mowed the whole lot, sure. But he didn't mow it the way a man mows a lot. A man mows in a spiral, or in long strips, end to end. And he does the whole thing and shuts it off and goes in. What Buddy did was mow his lot for maybe 45 minutes and then go up on the strip along our fence and stay there. Back and forth on the same 18 inches of ground for another half hour, sometimes 40 minutes, 3 or 4 feet from the chain link, cutting grass that had already been cut. Sometimes he'd do the fence strip and never touch the rest of the lot at all, and the whole time his head was turned. That's the thing I couldn't get around once I'd seen it. He drove that mower in a dead straight line, up and back, and he never once looked where he was going. His head was turned toward our house, not glancing, turned and held the way you'd hold your face toward a television. He'd go the whole length of the fence like that, and then reach the corner and swing the machine around without looking down and start back the other way, still facing us. And the reason he could do it, the reason he never once ran into the fence in 3 months, was that he had driven that exact line so many thousands of times that his hands knew it without his eyes. I said something to Carrie about it, and she said she'd noticed a long time ago and hadn't said anything, because she didn't want to be the kind of person who thinks things about a lonely old man. That's exactly how she put it. And I said, yeah, and we let it go because he waved, because he was polite, because in August he came to the fence with a plastic Food City bag of Better Boys and Cherokee Purples and told Carrie which ones to eat first. And because there is no polite way in a small Tennessee town to say to your neighbor, "Why do you look at my house?" But some things started stacking up after that, small ones, the kind you can't take to anybody. Our daughter May was 5 that fall. Her bedroom was the back corner of the house on the north side, the corner nearest the fence, nearest his lot. With one window that looked out on the strip of yard between the house and the tree line. In September, she started saying she didn't want that room. Wouldn't say why, or couldn't. She'd wake up 2 or 3 nights a week and come down the hall, and we'd walk her back and she'd cry. Carrie thought it was the new baby coming. The pediatrician thought it was the new baby coming. I thought it was the new baby coming. We put a nightlight in and got her a plastic castle for her dresser and moved on. In October, Carrie's cigarettes started disappearing from the carport. She smoked then, 2 or 3 a day, out in the carport because she was pregnant and ashamed of it, and she kept a soft pack of cool mild 100s tucked up on the ledge above the deep freeze where May couldn't reach. And twice that fall, she went out and the pack wasn't where she'd left it. Once it was on the freezer lid, once it was gone entirely, and she found it 3 days later back on the ledge, half empty. When she was sure it had been near full. She told me and I said she'd misremembered, and she said, yeah, probably. Pregnancy brain, she said. 9 months of a person telling you your own head can't be trusted, and eventually you agree with them. And that fall, on Halloween night, I found the gate on the chain link standing open. It had been latched. I know it had been latched because I'd latched it myself in September and never used it since. I chalked it up to trick-or-treaters, even though nobody trick-or-treats on a 2-acre lot on a state road with 3 houses on it. None of it was anything. That's the part that I need people to understand. None of it was anything by itself. It was all the ordinary noise of living somewhere. The Saturday it changed was the first weekend of November. And it was raining, and Buddy wasn't out. That's why I saw it. The grass was dormant and wet and dark green-brown, and I was out along the fence with a bucket looking for a hubcap that had come off my truck. I stopped walking because the ground on his side of the fence was bare. Not thin, not worn bare. Packed clay dirt with a sheen of rainwater standing on it, in a strip about 18 inches across. Running the entire 180 feet of that fence line without a blade of anything growing on it. It was compacted so hard the rain wasn't soaking in. It looked like the ground in front of a gate where cattle stand. You do not do that with a mower. I want to be very clear about that, and I've had 20 years to be sure. A mower cuts grass low. It doesn't kill it to the dirt in a stripe you could lay a 2x4 on. It doesn't compact clay. What does that is feet. Years of feet on the same line over and over and over, until nothing will grow there anymore. And then I followed it because I couldn't not, and that's when the bottom fell out of everything. The path came to the back corner of his lot, where the mowing stopped and the property went up into trees. And it kept going. It turned 90 degrees and ran east, up into the timber along the back of my lot, in leaf litter and rock and briars, where no mower had ever been in the history of that hillside. It was harder to see in there, but it was unmistakable once you were on it. A track in the leaves worn down to soil, going around the roots, ducking under a limb at a spot where the limb had been sawn off clean. It ran 140 feet back through those trees, and then it turned again, downhill into my yard, and it came out of the tree line behind my house, and it stopped behind May's bedroom window. There was a place there. I don't know what else to call it. The dirt in that spot was packed harder than anywhere else on the whole route. An oval maybe 3 feet by 2. And the low branches of the dogwood that stood beside it had been trimmed back on the side facing the window so that the sightline was clear. And they had been trimmed with loppers at a height a man's arms could reach. And the cuts were old and healed over, and there were newer ones under them, plived down into the ground. At the edge of that oval was a Maxwell House can, sunk to the rim so the lip was level with the dirt. Filled with rainwater and cigarette butts. I got down on my knees in the wet and I fished them out with my fingers, and I laid them out on the flat of a rock. And there were maybe 40 of them. And the paper had rotted off some, and the filters were dark with age. And every single one that I could still read said cool, and every single one was 100. I sat back on my heels in my own backyard, 30 feet from where my daughter slept, and I understood that a man had been standing in that spot smoking my wife's cigarettes for long enough to fill a coffee can. I didn't call the police that day. I want to say I did. What I did was stand up and walk in the house and go straight past Carrie into the kitchen and put both hands flat on the counter and stay there for about 10 minutes. Because I had a 5-year-old and a wife, 8 months pregnant, and no way at all to say out loud what I had just found without it living in that house forever. I called the sheriff's department on Monday from work. A deputy came out Tuesday. He was decent about it. He walked the line with me and looked at the can and looked at the trimmed dogwood, and he said, "Huh," about 4 times. And then he said the thing I've never forgotten. He said, "How long's he been over there?" I said 30-some years, I thought. And the deputy said, "Well, that's the trouble. Because there's no crime, that was the sum of it." Not one thing I could show him had happened on a date. The path could have been made in 1988. The butts could have blown in. A man walking his own property line is a man walking his own property line, and a man trimming a limb on his own side of the fence is a homeowner. And there was not one photograph, not one witness, not one night anybody could point to. He wrote a report. He said he'd have a word. I don't know what word he had. What I know is that Buddy Ledford came out the next Saturday and mowed his whole lot the regular way, in strips, end to end, and did the fence line in one pass like anybody would, and did not turn his head one single time. And when I raised my hand to him, he raised his back, and he never after that day looked at my house again for as long as we lived there. That should have been a relief. It wasn't. It was so much worse. Because a man who is doing something strange without knowing it's strange will keep doing it when you ask him about it. He'll be confused. He'll argue. A man who stops the instant he's caught, completely, cleanly, overnight, is a man who knew exactly what he was doing every day for however many years he did it, and knew exactly how it would sound, and had a plan for the day somebody found out. We put the house on the market in February and took a loss on it in April. Carrie had the baby in a rental in Jonesboro. We told everybody the schools were better. I looked him up once, years later, in an obituary. He died in 2011. Survived by no one. His wife gone, no children listed, and it named the church and the funeral home, and the fact that he had worked 31 years for the railroad. 31 years for the railroad. Which means he retired in about 1994. And the house we bought was built in 1968, and it had 4 owners before us. I have thought about that for 20 years now. About all the people who slept in that back bedroom in the corner, while a path got worn into the ground outside it, a 1/4 inch at a time. Because that path was not made in the 8 months we lived there. That path took a lifetime. I never once asked the realtor who lived there before us, and I never will. And if you want to know the worst thing I carry out of the whole business, it isn't the coffee can and it isn't the trimmed limbs. It's that he waved at me. Every single time. And I waved back. The house sat on a hill on the north side of Welch, West Virginia, on a street so steep the sidewalk had steps cut into it, and it had been split into 2 apartments sometime in the 60s when the town still had people in it. Downstairs was the original house. Front door, front porch, a bay window. Upstairs was ours, and you got to it by an outside staircase that ran up the side of the building. Wooden, painted gray. 22 steps with a landing halfway. $425 a month with water included. My wife Steph and I signed the lease in August of 2004. 6 weeks after I took a job with a company that serviced mining equipment out of Bluefield, and we were 27 and 25 and had $1,100 to our names. Verna Kate Ratliff owned it. She met us at the curb on the day we came to look, and she was about 70 years old. Small in a cardigan in August, with white hair set in the way old women in that country had their hair set every Friday for their whole lives. She had a soft voice. She apologized for the stairs. She told us the roof was new in '98, and the furnace was old but honest. And she asked Steph where her people were from and made a pleased little sound when Steph said McDowell County. And then she said, "Well, you all just take your time and look," and went inside and let us look and did not hover. And that alone made her better than the last 3 landlords I'd had. She was the sweetest woman I ever met for about 4 months. I've said that to people over the years, and it always comes out sounding like the setup to a joke, and it isn't. She was. She brought us a pan of gingerbread the first week. When Steph got a stomach bug in September, Verna left a jar of chicken broth on the landing with a rubber band around a note that said, "Sip this slow, honey." She never once came upstairs uninvited. She never played a television loud. In 11 years of renting, I had never had a landlord I thought about with anything but a kind of wary contempt. And I thought about Verna Ratliff the way you think about an aunt. The mail started in the second week. It was a practical thing and it made sense. The box was a single unit down at the road. At the bottom of 40 feet of that stepped sidewalk, one box for the whole property with our name and hers, both on a strip of tape. I left the house at 6 in the morning and got back at 6:30 at night. And by then it was dark and the walk down and back in the cold with a bad knee was a chore I did not want. Verna was home all day. So the first time she brought the mail up and set it on our bottom step under a rock, I came home and found it and felt looked after. After that it was every day, rain or not. Our mail would be sitting on the 3rd step from the bottom with a rock on top of it, squared up, and I quit going to the box at all. I doubt I laid a hand on that mailbox twice between August and December. The first thing that went wrong was the power bill in October, and I want to be honest that I did not think about Verna at all when it happened. What happened was that AEP sent a disconnect notice, and I called them mad as hell because I'd never gotten the bill, and the woman on the phone said it had gone out on the 12th, and I said, "Well, I never got it." And she said, "Sir, that happens," and knocked the late fee off, and I hung up feeling like I'd won something. In November, it was the car insurance. Progressive sent a cancellation for non-payment on a policy I'd have sworn I'd paid. And when I went back through it, I realized I hadn't paid it because I had never seen the statement. That one cost me $80 and a lapse on my record. I was angry for 2 days, and I blamed the post office. Because everybody in that town blamed the post office for everything, and the post office in Welch in 2004 deserved a certain amount of it. The thing that turned the key was Steph's sister. Her name is Robin, and she lived in Ohio, and she was one of those people who mailed things. Cards for everything, birthdays, Halloween, a card just to say she was thinking about you. She called Steph the first week of December. I was in the room, and I heard Steph say, "What card?" And then, "Robin, I promise you, no." And then a long silence, and then Steph said, "Did you send it to the right address?" And she read it out, and Robin had it right. And Robin said she'd sent one in September too, with a picture of her kids in it. Steph hung up and sat on the arm of the couch and said, "That's 3 now." We sat at the kitchen table that night with a legal pad and made a list, which is a thing I recommend nobody ever do, because a list turns a bad feeling into a fact. The power bill, the insurance, 2 cards from Rob, a W-4 packet from my company's HR that they swore they'd mailed twice. A letter Steph's mother had written her in October. Her mother wrote letters, actual letters, 3 or 4 pages, that Steph had never gotten and had been quietly heard about for 6 weeks. And every single thing on that list had come through a box that one other person had a key to. I want to describe what that feels like, because it isn't fear, not at first. It's something closer to nausea. Because the thought is ridiculous. Because she brought us gingerbread. Because you have spent 4 months feeling grateful, and the moment that suspicion gets into you, you understand that either you are a paranoid person who thinks a 70-year-old widow is stealing his junk mail, or every single kind thing that has happened to you in this house has been something else the whole time. So I did the reasonable thing first. I went to the box myself. It was a Thursday, mid-December. I got home a little before 6, and it was already full dark and cold enough that the steps had ice on them. I parked at the bottom, and instead of going up, I walked over to the box and put my key in it. Verna's porch light was off. I want that understood. Her porch light was off and her front door was closed, and I had made no noise except my shoes. The door opened while my hand was still on the box. She came out onto that dark porch in her cardigan, with no coat on in December, and she walked to the rail and she stopped and put her hands together in front of her, folded, the way a woman stands at a graveside. And she looked at me. She did not say hello. She did not say cold enough for you, or how's Steph, or any of the 50 things that woman had said to me across that yard since August. She stood there and watched me take my own mail out of my own mailbox, and she did not move or speak, and I said, "Evening, Verna," and my voice came out wrong, and she said nothing at all. I climbed those 22 stairs with my back crawling, and I did not look down until I had the door shut behind me. When I went to the window, she was still standing there in the dark with her hands folded. Looking up at our landing. She stayed out there 11 minutes. I timed it on the microwave. Steph wanted to move that night. I was the one who said we needed to be sure, and I have never in my life been so wrong about anything. I have never been able to decide whether I said it because I'm a careful man, or because I did not want to be the kind of person who thinks things about a lonely old woman. The chance came the following Wednesday. Verna went to church on Wednesday nights, Bible study, 6:30, at a Free Will Baptist church down on Elkhorn Street. And she left every Wednesday at 10 after 6 in a green Buick and came back at 8. And her back door, the one off the kitchen at the side of the house, had a lock that had been painted over so many times it did not throw, which I knew because I had helped her carry a dehumidifier in through it in September. I went down at 20 after 6. Steph stood at the top of the stairs. Her kitchen was clean and it smelled like the inside of a hymnal, old paper and cooking oil. And there was a calendar from a funeral home on the wall and a chair pulled out from the table at an angle like somebody had just got up. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator's motor knocking. I did not have to look long, and that's another thing I think about. It wasn't hidden well. It wasn't hidden at all, really. It was under the kitchen sink, behind a plastic dishpan, a liquor carton, an ancient age box. The flaps folded over each other. And when I pulled it out and got it up on the table under the light, I did not understand at first what I was seeing, because it was neat. Every piece was opened. Slid along the top edge with a knife, clean, no tearing. Every piece was flattened out. The envelope tucked behind its own contents. The folds pressed open with a hand until the paper lay down, and they were in order, not roughly. In order by date, oldest at the bottom, and the whole stack squared up on all four sides like it had been tapped on a table. The top of the stack was ours, the AEP bill, the progressive notice, my W-4 packet opened. Bank statements. Robin's card with her kids on it in Halloween costumes, and a second one, and a Christmas card I hadn't even known existed with a photograph of Robin's family standing in front of a tree. And Steph's mother's letter, 4 pages unfolded flat, and I read 3 words of it before I made myself stop. And those 3 words were, "Sweetheart, I know. 4 months of our life, laid down flat and stacked in a box." And under ours more, they went down 8 or 9 inches. Different names. Hurley, over and over, and Blankenship and Sizemore, and a couple I've forgotten, and every one of them addressed to that same house. That street number, upstairs. The postmarks at the bottom of that box were from 1997. There was a sympathy card from 1999 with a hand-drawn cross on it. There was a piece of paper that was a child's drawing, a house with a sun over it, folded into an envelope addressed to somebody named Dana Hurley, and it had been opened and flattened like all the rest. 7 years, 4 families before us. And she had not thrown away one single piece of it. I pat that box back exactly where it had been, behind the dishpan, with the flaps folded the way she'd folded them, and I took nothing out of it. Not our things. Not Steph's mother's letter. I have never understood why I did that. I've told myself it was because I didn't want her to know, but I think the truth is uglier and simpler, which is that I was standing in a dead quiet kitchen, holding 7 years of other people's private lives, and my hands did not want to be on it. We were out by Sunday. I called in sick Thursday and Friday, and we packed a 16-foot truck, and we took the beds and the dishes and the dog, and we left the curtains, and my brother came up from Grundy with his truck for the second load. Verna's Buick was in the carport the whole time. Her front door stayed closed. I saw the curtain in her bay window move exactly once, on Saturday afternoon, when I was carrying the couch down those gray stairs. She never called. Not that week, not ever. She never asked where we'd gone, never sent a demand for the rest of the lease, never returned the $425 deposit, and I never asked for it. I did not report her. I have gone around and around on that for 20 years. What I'd have reported, and to who, and whether a 70-year-old woman in a dying coal town gets prosecuted for opening a Christmas card, and whether I'd have had to stand in a room and explain how I came to be under her sink. That's the answer I always land on, and I know it's not a good one. We rented in Grundy for a year and then bought in Pikeville, Kentucky, in 2006, and we had our boy in 2007, and I stopped thinking about that house except at odd moments. The smell of a certain kind of old kitchen, the sound of a wooden step. In December of 2007, a Christmas card came to our house in Pikeville. It was in a plain envelope with our address handwritten in a spidery old woman's cursive and no return address at all. And there was no forwarding sticker on it, which matters, because we had never once lived at that Pikeville address while we knew Verna Ratliff. Nobody in West Virginia had it. Not her, not the post office, nobody. Inside was a card blank, the kind you buy in a box of 20 at a drugstore. Nothing written in it, not a word, not a name. And tucked in the fold was a photograph, a 4x6, developed at a 1-hour counter. It was taken from her yard from down low, looking up. And it was our stairs. Those 22 gray painted steps going up the side of that house, with the landing halfway, and the light on over our old door. There was nobody in it. The stairs were empty. I put it in the wood stub, and I never told Steph. And for 18 years now, every single December, I have gone out to the mailbox myself. My grandfather's name was Hollis Combs, and he built 2 houses on 11 acres outside of Whitesburg, Kentucky, in the early 60s. And until I was 41 years old, I thought that was the most ordinary fact about him. He built ours first in 1961, a low brick ranch with a carport and a walkout basement dug into the slope. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, the kind of house every man in that county with a steady paycheck was building that decade. He was a machinist at a tipple in Letcher County, and he was good with his hands in a way that men aren't anymore. He poured his own footers, he laid his own block. My mother was born in that house in 1962. Then in 1963, he built the second one. Same design, more or less 40 feet north of the first, on the same little bench of level ground, facing the same gravel drive. And in the spring of 1964, he sold it to a couple named Ora and Delbert Pruitt for $6,000 and change. That's how I grew up. 2 houses, 40 feet apart, sitting in the middle of 11 acres of pasture and second growth timber with no other structure in sight, and the ridge coming up behind and the creek down below. As a boy, I never thought about it once. Kids don't. It was just the shape of the world, our house, the Pruitt's house, the strip of grass between, the clothesline, the walnut tree. I've thought about it every single day since 2016. I want to say what kind of man he was, because it matters and because I can't make it fit. Hollis was quiet, not cold. He'd take me fishing and buy me a Coke at the store, and he'd let me hold a flashlight while he worked on the truck. And he was patient with the child in a way my own father never managed. But he did not talk. He'd sit on that carport in the evening in a metal chair and smoke and look at nothing for 2 hours and go to bed. My grandmother Ruby died in 1979, and after that he sat out there more. He died in 1991 when I was 16, in the hospital in Hazard, and at his funeral a man I didn't know took my hand and said, Your granddaddy was a private fellow, and I remember thinking that was a strange thing to say instead of something kind. The Pruitts were older than my grandparents. Delbert worked for the highway department and died sometime in the 80s. Ora stayed on alone in that house for a long time. She was still there when I was in high school. A heavy, slow-moving woman who kept her curtains shut in the summer and gave out full-size candy bars at Halloween. She had 2 daughters who were grown and gone before I was born, and one of them, the younger one, was named Judy. I only ever heard my mother say one strange thing about that family in my whole life. I was maybe 12, and I asked why Ora kept her curtains closed, and my mother said, without any weight on it at all, that family never was right after Judy. And when I asked what happened to Judy, she said nothing. She got married and moved to Ohio, and got up and started the dishes. Ora went into a home in 2007 and died in 2008. I and the daughters didn't want the house and never came for it, and it just sat. My mother got our place when Hollis died, and she lived in it until she passed in the spring of 2016, and then it came to me. I was 41, I divorced, working maintenance at a hospital in Hazard, and I made the decision that a lot of people in that country make. I gave up my apartment and moved home. 11 acres and a paid-off house is not something a man like me walks away from. The Pruitt house came with it, technically. My grandfather had held a note, and it had come back around through some mess of paperwork I never fully understood. And by 2016 it had been empty 8 years. It looked it. 2 windows out, the shingles curling on the north slope. Poison ivy up the chimney, thick as a man's wrist. My plan was to get a dozer in there in the fall and push it in a hole and burn it, and I told myself I'd walk through it first for anything worth keeping. I never did get to that. The crawl space came first. The kitchen line in our house was galvanized and it had gotten down to a trickle, and in July I decided I'd run new PEX under the house myself rather than pay a plumber $400. So on a Saturday morning I pulled the vent screen off the east side of the foundation and went under my own house on my belly with a headlamp and a drop cloth to lie on. It's about 26 inches of clearance under that house. Dirt floor, block foundation, joists overhead with the old wiring stapled along them. It smelled the way those places smell. Cold clay and dust and something faintly sweet, mice. I'd been under there twice as a kid on a dare and never since. I got the new line about 2/3 run and was working my way toward the north wall when my headlamp caught the opening. The north foundation wall of my house had a hole in it about 2.5 feet wide and 2 feet tall, starting 1 course up from the footer. And the blocks that had been there were sitting in a stack against the wall beside it, 8 of them, squared up, one on top of the other, and the mortar had been chipped off the edges of every single one. That's what stopped my breath, and I want to explain why. Because it's the same thing over and over with all of this. It wasn't broken. A foundation that fails, it cracks, it bows. It lets go and the block breaks, and there's rubble. This was cut. Somebody had taken a chisel and a hammer and worked the mortar joints out around 8 blocks and lifted them out clean and set them aside neat. The way you'd stack them if you meant to put them back someday. And behind that opening was a hole in the earth going north. I lay there a long time with my lamp pointed into it. It was a tunnel. I do not use that word loosely. It was maybe 30 inches wide and a little less than that tall, and it had a flat floor and the sides were straight. And every 4 feet or so there was a set of posts and a header over the top of them holding the roof of it up. Fence posts, some of them locust, still with the bark on, and some of them were mined timbers, squared oak. The real thing, the kind you could get from any operation in that county in 1965 by asking. There was even a length of number 9 wire strung along the left-hand side at about knee height going in. The wood was gray and dry and light as balsa when I put my hand on it. It was old work. It had been old before I was born. I did not go in that day. I backed out from under my house so fast I took skin off both elbows, and I sat in the yard in the sun for probably 40 minutes. I went in the next morning, and I've thought a lot about why I did. I had a flashlight and a hammer in my back pocket, and I told myself it was because a man ought to know what's under his own house. That's not the whole reason. The whole reason is that I already had a shape in my head. I needed to be wrong about it. It ran 80 feet. I paced it after, above ground, 81 feet from my north wall to the Pruitt's south wall, and it went in a dead straight line the entire way. That's the part a person who's never dug anything doesn't appreciate. You do not accidentally dig 80 feet in a straight line under a pasture. You do that with string and stakes and a plan. It took me 20 minutes to crawl it. 20 minutes on my elbows in the dark with the ceiling 4 inches off the back of my head. And about halfway there, I found the place where he'd rested. A spot where the tunnel widened out maybe 6 inches on the left side. And there was a Prince Albert tobacco tin sitting in the dirt with the lid rusted shut. And a candle stub. And the roof timber overhead had been worn smooth and dark in one spot where a hand had reached up and taken hold of it over and over and over for years. I put my hand on that place. It fit. The far end came up into the Pruitt's crawl space through a hole cut in their foundation, exactly like the one in mine, blocks stacked and everything. I came out of it into that space and got my back against the wall and swung the light around. Their crawl space had a little more room, maybe 32 inches. And in the middle of that dirt floor, there was a place where somebody had lived, not camped. Lived. There was a bed made out of flattened cardboard boxes laid down in 2 layers. And on top of that, a quilt. A real quilt. Hand-pieced, the kind my grandmother made, folded in half and gone black and slick with 60 years of damp, and the shape of a body still pressed into it. There was a hurricane lamp with the chimney suited up and about an inch of oil still in the base. There was a coffee can of cigarette butts and a pint jar and a folded newspaper so far gone I could only read part of a date. And it said 1968. And there was a hole in the ceiling. Somebody had cut through the subfloor and the flooring above it, cut with a keyhole saw. You could see the tooth marks in the pilot hole where he'd started, and made an opening about 11 inches across, right up into the floor of what would have been the hallway of that house. The hallway that ran between the 2 back bedrooms. There were 2 concrete blocks stacked under it to stand on. That's all it was. A hole big enough for a head and shoulders in a hallway floor, and something to stand on to reach it. I did not stay under there. I got out through their vent hole, and I came up into the daylight, and I sat with my back against that ruined house, and I was sick in the grass. And then I did the thing I have never been able to explain to myself. I went and got my truck, and I hauled 4 bags of secrete and a wheelbarrow around to the north side of my own house. I went under there, and I mortared those 8 blocks back into my foundation one at a time, the way he'd taken them out. It took me until dark. I have thought 1,000 times that I should have called somebody. And I never have been able to figure out who I would have called, or what I'd have said, or what any of them would have done except make it a story that everybody in Letcher County got to have. The dozer came in October. I stood at the end of the drive and watched a man I paid $900 push that house into a hole with everything still in it, and I never walked through it first. And I have never told him or anybody else what was underneath. Here's what I know, laid out flat, and here's where it stops. My grandfather built both those houses. He built ours in '61 and theirs in '63, and he laid every block of both foundations with his own hands. And 40 feet apart on 11 acres is not a distance you pick unless you mean something by it. He held the note. He was there the whole time, sitting out on that carport in a metal chair, evening after evening, smoking, looking at nothing for 30 years. And there was a tunnel between the 2 of them, dug from our side, I shored with timber a working man could get, going to a hole in the floor of a hallway between 2 girls' bedrooms. I cannot make it be anybody else. I have tried. I have tried Delbert Pruitt and it doesn't work. Because the opening in our wall was made from inside our crawl space and the blocks were stacked on our side. I have tried a drifter and it doesn't work either. Because a drifter doesn't spend 2 years with a mattock and a string line under another man's house. That family never was right after Judy. I'm 51 now and I still live in that house. Because I've got nowhere else to be and there's not a soul on earth I could sell it to without lying. In the winter when the wind gets under the floor, I can hear the joists tick and I know the sound is nothing. I lie there anyway and think about a man on his belly in the dark with a candle, 80 feet of black behind him and a stack of block under his feet, standing up slow into the floor of a house he built himself. And the worst part isn't any of that. The worst part is that he took me fishing and he was kind to me and I loved him and I still do. And I don't know how to put those two men in the same body.